like to hear more of the testimony before asking questions. Is that correct?
Thank you. The planes, as always, from New Mexico are always hard to get because there's always missed connections. So thank you, and I will go after New Mexico.
Sounds good. Thank you. All right. Recognize the gentleman from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. Ms. Hagman, thank you for your testimony. You know, it's one big disappointment on our debt ceiling negotiation was taking REINS out and put in PAYGO, which OMB can pretty much dismantle at any at the whim of whatever they think. But no, this is common sense to me. The unelected bureaucrats that Ms. Fishback talked about, it's like they make political decisions. The issues we face now coming from this administration, if you really want to help the people, get rid of some of these regulations. REINS Act has some accountability to it, and I applaud you for doing it. You know, government doesn't create jobs. It's far too expansive the way it is now, and this administration has gone wild with it. So I applaud you for doing this. Thank you for your explanation. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I have no further questions.
Thank you. With that, the gentlelady from New Mexico is recognized.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Johnson, Representative Hagman, for coming and testifying today. Representative Johnson, you know, I am sometimes taken back by, I'm looking at these bills, and we often hear from the other side of the aisle about the fact that we have too much layers, too many layers, too much bureaucracy, too many hindrances to actually get what's needed to be done, right? And every time you add a layer, it strikes me that we're also adding both delay and cost. Can you talk about whether these bills would indeed cost the taxpayers more money for us to actually just have the federal agencies implement the laws that we have passed?
Well, it would certainly result in more money flowing from corporations to white shoe, silk stocking law firms to have de novo reviews in court of agency rulemaking decisions. So, and that would mean more cost to consumers ultimately. But it also would add to less consumer protection, and it would actually lead to less regulations and really gum up the work so that there would be no regulations. The total deconstruction of the administrative state is the stated goal of the MAGA Republicans, and this is a step in that direction. And so if this should pass, then look for additional laws that would further gum up the regulatory process. And it would have nothing other than, it would do nothing other than to increase costs, lessen safety. It would hurt consumers of America to go down this road.
Right, and thank you very much for highlighting the greater role that would be given to the wealthy and their ability to, as you say, hire high-priced attorneys to go and gum up the system, because that would actually take it away from the administrative process, where in the administrative process, they're required to take testimony from the public. And so it's not hard to provide that testimony during the Administrative Procedures Act, because you send it in, you show up at hearings, you do not need to be represented when you are giving testimony for regulation. Is that right, Mr. Representative Johnson?
Well, since 1946, the Administrative Procedures Act passed by Congress, a comprehensive framework for the issuance, modification, and repeal of rules has been in place and has been subjected to court review. Case law has developed, and it is a area of law that has worked. And now we get those who want to do away with the Administrative Procedures Act so as to do away with regulation, period. That's where we are in this country, a country with no rules, only the strong survive, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, the middle class shrinks, and we got children going to work, working 14 hours a day without public schools to attend. That's where folks want to take us back to as they take away individual liberties through the courts while awarding greater rights to corporations. And so this is a step in that direction, this deregulatory approach, and trying to take us back to a time when Americans were working 14-hour days and getting their arms and fingers and hands cut off and legs amputated because of unsafe working conditions and no minimum occupation laws in terms of hours worked, safety, that kind of thing. This country was in such a period, but thankfully, back in 1946, when the Administrative Procedures Act was implemented, it heralded in a new era of the growth of America, not just the growth of wealthy industrialists, but the growth of the middle class in America. And so this is really an attack on the middle class.
Right, it's an attack on the role that government has, and we pass the laws. We've already been involved in the process. It's not like Congress hasn't been involved in the process. We have passed the laws, and then we expect the administration to implement those laws. And we already have, a process for Congress to actually overturn something that the administration does when we don't think it's right. And indeed, this Congress has already done that numerous times, historic highs in which this Congress has used the CRA. And I really, am struck by the Separation of Powers Restoration Act. It's going to be giving enormous power to the judiciary right now at a time when Americans have lost their faith in the judicial branch, especially because of the extreme and partisan decisions of the Supreme Court and of the attitude that we have in somebody like Justice Thomas, who has been taking vacations worth $500,000 from a billionaire. That same billionaire has bought a house for his mom, paid for relatives, a great-nephew's college. There has been an erosion of faith in the courts precisely because at the Supreme Court level, they are not holding themselves to the higher standard they need. So there is, by removing these and putting it over in the courts, you are actually removing it from the people. You are restricting access. You're restricting liberty. You're restricting the freedom that you have just described that has worked so well for 80 years as we have advanced. I mean, I was over along the Ohio River for a graduation a couple of weeks ago, and it was like people were telling me about what it was like when that was so polluted and the fish were dying. And, we've had rivers that have caught fire. And thanks to regulation, thanks to two things, Congress has passed the law, and then we have designated who is going to implement it. So we know that right now Americans are simply losing their confidence. In 22, only 18% of Americans said they have a great deal of confidence in the court. And then with the latest revelations regarding Justice Thomas, it's even gone lower. So I think that we need to maintain the Administrative Procedures Act, maintain the process that is already in place for Congress to act when we believe that an administrative procedure rule should not be implemented. And thank you so much for appearing and clarifying that history that's so important of how it's through regulation of the laws we've implemented that we have actually cleaned up our rivers. We've made such advances and protected those against child labor. And then when they don't do it, we can call them in our oversight role and hold them accountable. Isn't that right?
That's correct. And I heard a comment during this hearing that the guys in the black robes don't care, the guys in the black robe is on the other side of the team, is what was said. When regulations get challenged in court under current practice, the comment was made that the guy in the black robe, or in other words, the judge, is on the other side of the team. But nothing could be further from the truth. The courts have been captured by the corporate interests, particularly the United States Supreme Court. But the higher you go, the greater the capture. And the problem is that when you start having de novo reviews of agency rulemaking in the courts, then you are kicking it to a situation where the Federalist Society has planted judges and justices into position to rule in favor of the corporate interest. And so the handwriting is on the wall in terms of SOPRA and REINS.
Thank you, Representative Johnson, and I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When we debated this in the committee, it seemed